RWBY, Volume 6, Episode 7, The Grim Reaper. What happens? The episode begins with Cinder trying really hard to be threatening as she officially teams up with Neo. Suddenly in the past, we watch as a mysterious, hooded figure, revealed to be a young Maria, take down a giant Nevermore with the help of her silver eyes. A group of bandits just suddenly appear, drop Maria's very cool title of Grim Reaper, and they all tussle. Maria does well, but still ends up getting her eyes cut by Talk. Talk reveals that she has a master who wants Maria dead because of her eyes, and ends up jabberjawing for too long as Maria kills her. Back in the present, Crow throws around some more backstory on the Grim Reaper and his admiration for her. Maria is down on herself for a bit, and RWBY asks if she could teach her more about her eyes. But before they can go any further, RWBY suddenly gets a call from Jaune. The kids realize that they are very close to Argus, and in town the group reconnect with Juniper. Jaune and Ren tells the girls about Argus's history, and the gang meets one of Jaune's sisters, Saffron, and her wife Tara. After spending a long time eating sandwiches, the episode just kinda ends. Cinder's whole talk seems kinda unnecessary. It was pretty well established that they were teaming up when we last saw them. You don't need your characters to physically shake hands every time they decide to work together. This scene basically just seems to be covering up for some questionable behavior from last volume. Why does Cinder attack Weiss and not RWBY? That's dumb. No, you see, this scene has Cinder explain that Salem says she's not allowed to kill RWBY, which is why she totally ignores RWBY for that whole fight. Even though RWBY being there was the whole reason she wanted to go and was why she teamed up with Raven. The continued attempt and failure to have Cinder be menacing makes everything she does in the scene come across as eye-rollingly edgy. It's a good thing this whole encounter is only 2 minutes long because it's aggressively skippable. Regardless of my feelings on the previous scene, I think it would have been better if the episode started with Maria's flashback. Her eyes are what we left off with the last episode. It would have flowed into this flashback really nicely. Not to mention that jumping back and forth between the present and the past and back to the present like this could confuse some viewers. Though personally, I think they do a good job making it clear this is a younger Maria. Wearing the same color, her dress has a similar silhouette to the one she wears now, and it's almost impossible to miss the fact that her cane is one of her sides, life and death. The only thing is, I wish she was shorter. I get that elders tend to shrink in size, but old Maria's real little, so her being so tall when young is a bit off-putting. Gravity dust is really cool and prompts some super fun combat ideas. It's also one of the most unique dust types in the show, and I wish we'd get to see it more often. But I also can't help but wonder, why doesn't RWBY use it? If her whole problem is, I need to learn to fight hand to hand because I keep dropping my weapon, why doesn't she just use gravity dust to be able to bring it back to her like Maria does? Put a rock on your belt and put another one on your gun. You'll never lose it again. Easy peasy. Despite this very cool shot, giant Nevermores are not threatening. The kids were able to take a ride on one and then later kill it all before they were officially enrolled in school, or were even really friends. It's like trying to pretend the first boss in a video game should be considered scary. They're not. Talk's a really neato character. I like that RT started to remember that these characters were originally based off of fairy tales and have started to reincorporate that idea into the show. Talk's allusions to the crocodile from Peter Pan with her almost pirate-like aesthetic and clock-based semblance are a lot of fun. It helps her go from some dumb throwaway character to actually memorable. Yay! Grim Reaper is the coolest play on words ever, and I'll never be clever enough to rival it.
You're the Grim Reaper.
So this fight's pretty fun, lots of cool animation and movement, but it's got some stuff that I can't really ignore. Why does Talk initiate invincible mode just to have her henchmen run up instead? That's a waste of Talk's minute. On that note, when Talk does join the battle, why does Maria bother to try and fight her? Even if Maria doesn't know what Talk's semblance does, Talk still gave her the 1 minute time frame. Why wouldn't Maria just run and dodge and try to time out whatever Talk's counting down to? Maria's preflexes are a pretty neat idea, but I can't help but notice that all that seems to do is make her put in more effort into blocking bullets than everyone else. Like, don't get me wrong, the way Maria actually has to put in effort to block the gunshots is way more fun to watch. But in a world where they establish that you can simply wave your weapon back and forth and achieve the same goal, I can't help but wonder why Maria doesn't just twirl her sides around instead. Regardless, I dig the fact that it actually takes 60 seconds for Talk's timer to go off. That's really fun. And I love that you can hear the ticking continuing throughout the whole fight. Melissa Sternenberg gives another really good performance for when Maria loses her eyes, but I also hate listening to her scream in pain, so we'll just gloss over that.
How exactly does a legend just disappear?
The same way everyone just forgets about the god, king, and queen once they get a divorce. The script demands it to be so.
I wanted to be as good as the Grim Reaper.
Well, I'm nothing but a disappointment, so you're well on your way.
Maria, what the fuck? So wait, Talk's master wanted Maria dead because of her eyes, but Salem's ordered Cinder not to kill the silver-eyed girl we all know. Why? Was someone else hiring thugs to kill silver-eyed warriors? Is RWBY double extra super special for some reason? Has Salem's tactics changed over the years and now she's collecting the silver-eyed warriors for something? Forcing Cinder to not be allowed to kill RWBY works directly against what the very next scene tells us, that Salem wants the Silver Eyes dead. And this mismatched information hasn't been touched on at all since. So I like that RWBY prompts Maria to teach her more about her eyes, but I'm disappointed that RWBY totally forgets the idea the moment she finishes that sentence. It seems more like RWBY suggests it as a way to make Maria feel better, rather than her wanting to get better at her special shit. Literally, this could have been alleviated by having RWBY be the one to bring it up again when the two next talk about their eyes. Sometimes simple solutions are the best fixes for problems. I love that RWBY's contact name for Jaune is Vomit Boy. That's a really cute callback. Miles is also doing a very good job with his voice acting this volume.
RWBY! Oh, thank you! I've been checking my scroll for your signal since we made it to the city.
Fun stuff. This soft piano version of the opening playing in the background is delightful. Honestly, the background music is consistently one of the best parts of the show, and it deserves the unending praise that the fans so often reserve for Jeff and Casey Williams exclusively. That's a nice matte painting. What is this hill? Why is it so vertical? It's the sheerest drop I've ever seen. There's no way the kids are gonna get down that without the flatbed flipping over. It makes me laugh so much. I kinda love it. A fun reuniting of the whole team, but I'm kinda distracted by who embraces who. Yang and Ren have never talked, but they hug each other here? Since when has Blake ever interacted with Jaune before? And don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing having all these unseen pairings, but moreover it's just a little distracting. It makes me realize how little this group really does talk to each other. Honestly, Ren hugging anyone outside of Nora or Jaune would be weird since he doesn't get to talk to anyone else. Jaune doesn't talk to Yang or Blake. Blake doesn't get to talk to, well, most of them, really. This cute little interaction mostly just makes me wish we saw the kids actually fucking talk to each other more, and makes me lament how little this group gets to do together, too. So let's take a second to talk about this moment with Jaune and RWBY. When I first saw this, I'd had the thought to myself, are they trying to ship Jaune and RWBY here? They get a whole extra scene, they hug for longer than the others did, and I think a lot of people had a similar thought. Well, with the help of some hindsight offered by the next volume that I won't spoil, it's pretty obvious RWBY x Jaune is not going to be a thing. I think the reason the fans, myself included, assumed this was RT trying to start something romantic between these two is simply because it's a dude and a girl, and I'm embarrassed about that, because the real goal here is quite clearly friendship. RWBY and Jaune have always been friends. They were the first friends they both made at Beacon. They hug for longer and are happy to see each other because they do really care about each other. Just not in a romantic way. And I really appreciate that Roosterteeth do have a platonic friendship in these two. Just because he's got a peen and she's got a vag doesn't mean the two have to want to get physical. They can just be friends. Boys and girls can be platonic friends, and I really like that RWBY has that here. And before you go into the comments and tell me why Lancaster's the best ship and they've clearly been setting it up from the start, don't bother. I don't give a fuck about your favorite ships, so don't waste your time. Though I will say the Roosterteeth have shot themselves in the foot here a bit, simply because of how the rest of the cast behave. Another reason many of us may have mistaken this interaction as get ready for them to date, is because everyone else in the show have to be stable to their love interests at all times. Oscar only has one-on-one conversations with RWBY. Blake and Yang have to do everything together. Ren and Nora aren't allowed to get too far apart from each other. Back before they decided to make Bumblebee a thing, Blake had to have Sun accompany her in all of her important adventures. The show could really benefit from the whole cast actually doing things with more people than just the ones they want to date. I think it would have helped this scene land a bit more successfully. This history lesson is boring, and useless in regards to the story. Lore stuff like this should be reserved for supplemental material. A book about the history of Remnant, or a fun fact listed in a mobile game. How Argus got settled isn't important information. Make it an extra piece of lore available outside of the show for all the lore-loving fans. This part is stupid. RWBY looks back and forth between Jaune and Saffron like them being siblings is the most unbelievable thing on Earth. It's just like a weird way to establish Saffron's relationship to Jaune, and honestly, it feels like more was intended to happen with this than we ended up getting. I like that Yang and Weiss are the ones playing with Adrian because they're used to watching after their own younger siblings. Wow, look at those camp characters. Like, don't get me wrong, this is not bad art, but it really just looks like a cartoon. Like, I talk about how the Team RWBY photo looks like an illustration, but this looks like a screenshot from another show. It's a completely different art style, which is super distracting. From here, the episode kinda just stops doing anything. They set up the fact that Tara works at the relay tower, which doesn't really matter, but it's mostly just eating sandwiches, praising Team RWBY for existing, and bad jokes. It's a really flaccid way to end an episode that started with... It seems pretty clear to me that the scene drags on for so long because they needed to get the episode length up. From the moment they land in Argus, the cast starts moving like they're stuck in syrup, and these elongated shots of benign nothingness becomes more frequent. A pretty blatant attempt to push the episode from 11 minutes long to 15. It's a shame that Roosterteeth values having longer episodes filled with dead air rather than concise, well-written ones that may not be long enough to run multiple ads on. Just because an episode is short doesn't make it bad. I think this is a good time to jump into nitpick corner. These are less important things I noticed while watching the episode, but still felt worthwhile to mention. Why does Neo insist on looking disheveled with tears in her pants and stuff? She can change her appearance at will. Why are you going out of your way to look fashionably haggard? Why do all the bandits have single-use weapons? Just a hammer, just a gun. Even Talk's swords are just swords. I miss the cool weapons. What does Maria do after she kills Talk? Was she able to call an ambulance, or did she have to find her way out of the mountains without eyesight? If the girls would have just continued following the path they were on, they still would have found Argus. Why have Jaune call the group? If Argus is so cold, why are so many people here barely covered up? And so, that was the Grim Reaper. This episode is the beginning of really seeing the torn edges that have been taped together as the showrunners began to run out of time for the volume. Things seem to be missing, things seem inserted into random spots. The whole pacing of the episode feels like it's actually two mashed together. The first half of the episode feels like the end of an episode going over Maria's past and finishing with the kids seeing Argus on the super steep hill. And the second half feels like the beginning of a different episode. It feels like the kids were supposed to talk to Cordo the same episode they landed in Argus, but some problem behind the scenes meant the episode list had to get shifted, and I think the Grim Reaper suffers because of that. The beginning half is exciting and fun, while the second half comes across as nothing more than a waste of time and animation effort, where the higher-ups insisted that the episode had to be longer, but also were reluctant to actually let anything else happen after reuniting the groups. I would rather have a satisfying 10-minute long episode over a tone-deaf, dreary 15-minute long one. Size doesn't matter, it's what you do with it. The episode starts strong, even with the unwarranted cinder scene. It was fun and did some good development for the world, story, and characters. But the second half sours the mood as the script starts meandering across one useless topic change to the next, prioritizing being longer without doing anything worthwhile with all that length. Honestly, if you're going to watch this episode, just stop right when the kids breach that hill. You'll walk away with a much better story than if you sat through the whole thing.
Look at how cute these pens are. Zach, that's gay. Jared, we've been dating.
Just would have flowed better, you know? But whatever, man. It's just my opinion. I'm gonna say that last line again. Sorry for the sudden, long-ass pause, but I'm just gonna rearrange the sentence a little bit. I think it would have helped the scene land a bit more successfully. There we go. Use that one. Listen to me. Use that one.